So would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, your background?
Yeah, so my mom was in the Navy brat, kind of lived a little bit of everywhere. Ended up in Monterey by getting a job at the Navy Postgraduate School 8 years ago. And so there I serve as the executive assistant to the Chief Information Officer, the CIO, and Director of ITAX, where I'm helping them kind of with their recruitment and retention efforts, so kind of stuff related to HR, maintaining IT personnel in the government, which is particularly difficult, given that they can easily go up to Silicon Valley and get a job there for at least twice as much as what they would make in the government. But this is a kind of a new position. I started that in December. I'm also running for City Council in Monterey in November. And so, you know, the housing, being able to sit on this board is particularly important to me because housing is a huge issue, I mean, in this entire county, but particularly Monterey, being so expensive and having a lot of folks drive into the city to work and then having to drive back out. So anyways, I'm eager to learn from all of you and hope to contribute to the conversations in a productive way. So thank you.
Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you, Karen.
Okay, now we'll move on to the updates from staff.
All right, so at the beginning of the month, we had 2 requests for proposals out on the street. One was for an affordable housing asset management, data management system. For those of you who don't know, we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 215 owner-occupied inclusionary housing units in the county. We have another 400 or so rental units that have some connection to the inclusionary housing program. There are first-time homebuyer loans out there. There are neighborhood stabilization program, down payment assistance loans out there. Over the years, we've just kind of cobbled together different databases and spreadsheets, and we're looking for something that's going to make it a little easier to manage all that information and data, and maybe migrate more information on not just the county's restricted properties, but hopefully at some point get to the point where we have the same information for all the cities and all the other income or occupancy restricted units that are in the county. So we have a big comprehensive place to go and figure out what's there, where there may be gaps, and simplify some of what we have to do with monitoring and processing refinance requests and things like that. So that's out there. The other one is the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance update. We've mentioned this back in October, I believe it was. Last September, the governor signed 15 housing-related pieces of legislation into law. In 2010, the county adopted a new general plan that required new percentages for affordability in subdivisions and new housing development. The Inclusionary Housing Ordinance was not updated to reflect the general plan at the time, and now we have to sync it with not only the general plan, but with all the new housing legislation that has come up. So we received one proposal. Wayne took a look at it. We will probably be bringing them in for interviews. This is going to be an 18 to 24-month project to try to sync this thing and bring some rationality to the fees that we charge through the inclusionary in lieu fee, and make sure that everything we're doing is compliant with everything, all the new laws, and maximize the number of affordable units that we produce. So that's out there. Yes.
Which consultant responded to the RFP?
It was, the team is headed by Lassard Development Consultants out of San Diego, but they are partnering with Kaiser Marston to do the financial feasibility and Goldfarb Lippman to do the legal stuff.
Wow.
So Goldfarb Lippman is somebody that the county's already used for years on its inclusionary housing program. They drafted all of our old agreements and the documents that we use. So it's a team that has some experience behind it. Kaiser Marston has also worked with the county, most recently that I can remember, on East Garrison and all the financial feasibility for that. One of the challenges that we're hoping to address is we haven't updated our in lieu fee schedule since 2011 because it is such a challenging process to do. So we're hoping for something that makes a little more sense.
Kaiser Marston and Goldfarb Lippman are real pros. Who's the lead, Lasar?
Lasar Development. They're out of San Diego. They have done a lot of work with, if you're familiar with the Central City Development Corporation down there in San Diego, they handle the redevelopment of downtown basically. And that's where Lasar got its start from what it looks like. So they seem to have put together a pretty good team.
So you're looking for them to incorporate the inclusionary housing ordinance into the general plan.
We're looking to rewrite the inclusionary housing ordinance so that it is consistent with the general plan and all the new state laws that have passed. And understand that when the board adopted the 2010 general plan, it was only the inland areas. It does not affect the coastal areas. So, but we're hoping for something that will be applicable in the coastal areas as well.
It's interesting, because I've got a planner that's trying to get us, we're trying to do some H2A housing, and they're trying to get us to include the inclusionary housing ordinance into that, so essentially
Oh,
incorporating part of the general plan. Like, well, why the heck would we do that if let the county do it as a whole?
Let me know who the planner is and I will set them straight. Employee housing is exempt.
It's a California project.
Oh, is it the Harrison Road?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anaquanga?
Okay. Yeah, employee, when I get the referral, I will just say it's exempt because I believe under the inclusionary housing ordinance, employee housing is an exempt project.
You have it, because she sent you a copy of the stuff, like you sent it to me a month and a half ago.
Okay. Okay.
In fact, I don't know if you're planning on attending, but there's a meeting next Wednesday, supposedly the county people,
With Dave and Anna.
well, and a bunch of others.
Okay.
to talk
No,
about.
I'm not on that invite list yet.
Okay,
You're
well,
looking
I'm
for more to
concerned
do.
you're invited.
Yeah.
I'm representing the client. You're
Yeah.
invited. If you
Okay.
can kibosh some of the stuff that they're trying to ask us to do that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
If you can't, if Dave can't do it, then you can come in his place and do it.
I'll make sure that he knows what to say about inclusionary housing. That's easy.
Go ahead.
So I heard my favorite subject in lieu of fees.
Mhm.
So if you want to keep talking along these lines to compartmentalize that and then come to in lieu of fees, I don't want to take it in another direction, but I don't want this part to go on before we do talk about in lieu of fees.
Okay.
So I'll leave that to your chair if other people have.
Well, the in lieu fees are part of the ordinance, so now's as good a time as any.
Okay, so a little background for, and I believe you weren't here with us at this time, but you heard this probably, I think, at your first meeting, but for new people who are here. So part of the, one of the wonderful things about having fresh eyes is people come in not knowing the history. This body wrestled greatly with in lieu of fees years and years ago, and there was some carry knowledge in the group about that. So some other people came in who were not part of that, and at a certain point looked at the in lieu of fees and did some math and said, we can make units for this amount of money? That's wonderful. Why don't we do that more? Because that's super affordable. And it turned out the in lieu of fee did not translate, in the naivety of the person I'm not naming right now. It's like, well, we don't build those units, we use that to leverage other funds, you know, to create money, et cetera. So I got an education there. Then we looked through all of this stuff. Well, what are the rules regarding reassessing the in lieu of fees? And it turns out an annual report is supposed to be taking place to the Board of Supervisors, and that wasn't happening because there was no movement. You know, they weren't going to assess it. It's super complex. It's very expensive. There's no money for it. So long ago, that was understood by the Board of Supervisors and everybody, we're not going to report on that. So I had suggested that we do report on that, and we say, we would love to give you better in lieu of numbers. We cannot because we have no funding for it. You are asking us to do that, but you're not giving us the money to do it. We would like the money to do it. And we had
Let's
a,
cut a
Yeah.
little bit there. At one point in time, in my tenure, PAC did come up with some proposed new in lieu fees, and basically took them this way, and got slowed down.
oh, okay, that too. So what Dave did, we had a subcommittee. Yes, so this is a lot of the institutional knowledge here, these two gentlemen. So we had a subcommittee, Margaret, Wayne, was that you two, and me with Dave? And we sat down and we kind of looked at this, and then some money appeared, maybe because of these changes. So they are now looking at all of this. I think you hired a firm, the one you just talked about, to help.
That's what we're trying to do right now, that's what the RFP is for.
Okay, great. So that's some background there. So I would like to say this so this body has this information. Once we come up with this figure, I think that we should either change the rules that say we're going to report to the Board of Supervisors on this annually, change that, so we're not in violation of that agreement. You know, it's not a hard agreement, but you might as well have your processes down for the public. The public should be entitled to look and see what the procedure is, or actually do it. And I'm actually at this point in favor of that. Every year, it doesn't matter if we change it. So just want that out there. Now's not the time to act on that, but I just wanted to say that so it doesn't get lost.
That is one of the things that we have asked the consultants to come up with, is a way to make it easy and rational to update this thing every year.
But even if they don't come up with an easy way, we still are obligated to report.
Yeah, we'll deal with that in the final draft of the ordinance.
Thank you. Thank you for everything you do.
When was the last time that was reported out when it got shut down?
5 years ago?
Yeah, probably, yeah. At least 4 years ago, yeah.
Okay. And 10 years ago,
But
since it was.
it's a moving target because, you know, there's so many changes taking place. And in essence, what I've read through as far as the RFP is concerned, they're covering all of that. They're finally going to update in reference to the current rules that have changed and all the ordinance and all the other things have changed, and come up with a very methodical way of calculating that and being able to update it on a yearly basis as well. So that's part of the RFP. So if they're going to deliver what they say they're going to deliver, it will be there.
Well, quite honestly, the way it's written that you're supposed to come up with the numbers is so convoluted, I would challenge anyone here to try to figure out what it really meant.
Well, how confident are we that they're going to actually meet the proposal in the RFP?
That's what they're going through now.
That's what we're going through right now, the solicitation processes.
The good news is
Vet them.
at least KMA has done it and doing it for Santa Cruz, has done it for LA, has done it for other areas. So they're not coming in and having to reinvent the wheel. They're coming in with a pretty deep resource that they've experienced before. So I think it's probably the right people. It's too bad we didn't get more than one response, but the response we did get looks very, very promising.
Great.
Last thing, loan activity. As you may know, the county has, it's about $5 million in outstanding loans between the Community Development Block Grant Program, the Home Program, the, and the old redevelopment tax increment, low-income housing trust fund. Most of these loans don't have a lot of activity in any given month. About 15, 16 years ago, the state came in and said all the home loans that you have out there, they're just going to be deferred for 30 years now. So we don't get any monthly income, and the downside is if you had a home-funded first-time homebuyer down payment assistance loan, you're going to pay off your first, and then you're going to have this huge nut that comes due at year 30, but the idea is, I guess, from HCD that you'll be able to refinance and take that out. But we are in the process of, one of the projects that we had is Brooklyn Street, which is a 2-unit rental project in Pajaro. And South County Housing, when it was assumed by Eden, has determined that this does no longer fit into their portfolio of property. So they are selling it to Pajaro Valley Shelter Services. So it's still going to remain as affordable. And we are going to get about $350,000 back when that pays off, probably here in the next 6 weeks. So 103,000 of that goes into the home program. Another 110,000 goes into the CDBG Urban County project, and the balance goes into the redevelopment fund, and we'll figure out how to reuse that for another affordable housing project out there.
We also got a loan payoff last week from, it was a rehab loan, a home program, and a little bit of CDBG money from borrowers that passed away in 2015. So during our monitoring efforts, we realized that the borrowers were no longer living in the unit. So it took us about 2 years to get payment, but we got $226,000 last week. $185,550 was home for the home program, and $40,536 was for CDBG. And then I have 2 outstanding demands out there that I requested payoff on another first-time home buyer loan. $122,000, that should be coming in within the next 30 days. And then an in lieu fee of $44,000. So, getting a little bit of money.
Okay. So, to cut things straight, I think we're back to, is there any new business?
No. We're beating that one
New
down.
business. All right, so now we're back to old business then.
So, I'm sorry that you had to sit through that video or something else. Back at our last meeting,
So we're on item,
we're
Old
on
business.
item
we're
4.
on 4, okay, got it.
We presented a request from the developers of the Pasadera subdivision to convert their 12 low-income rental units. We're back tonight. We'd hoped to have Alfred Diaz-Infante from Chispa here to help with the conversation. Basically, what we're looking for from the HAC tonight is guidance on how we want to proceed to develop a recommendation to the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors as to how we want to handle these units. We have Cody from representing the applicants here, and then we can go into any questions that you might have and try to sort through this thing. Okay? Are there any questions that you need for background?
Well, yeah, well, I guess, I don't know the background, but I mean, we did talk a little bit about it, and we asked for some additional information to be presented.
We're missing materials.
Where's that?
I know I'm missing, I want to make note to somebody, whoever's taking minutes, that I'm missing the minutes from January, so I'd love to,
There was no meeting in January, it was canceled.
oh, well, so what did we approved? That was the
Yeah,
thing I
we
was saying on.
Okay.
So I'd love a copy of the minutes, not tonight, or just if someone has it. But yeah, so I was thinking, did I miss some materials? Because we had a whole laundry list of things we requested, and I don't see it here.
So, and I did communicate that to the applicant. The things that you had requested at the time were,
You know what we requested? We requested, come prepared to possibly discuss the marketing strategy, because we had questions about how and where the client had been marketing the units. We wanted to see documentation that backs up this quote. Most people who qualify for low-income housing do not want to be as far from schools, jobs, and services as Pasadera, end quote. We want information on how the client is selecting pre-qualifying tenants before sending the info over to the county for income certification, because there may be deficiencies in the process. and, you know, why the request is for sale at moderate income as opposed to low income affordability levels. So that was really clear, and that was back in September, so I'm curious where we go, because we could really use that.
So, I'll let Cody,
Or introduce Virginia.
oh,
Hi, Virginia.
we're on item 4. So Cody, you wanna?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Cody Phillips for the applicant. It's my first time in front of this body. I appreciate you all taking the time to be here, certainly. I appreciate the concerns that you reiterated there from the September meeting. I was going to kind of give a breakdown maybe of the application. Sounds like Darby has already maybe covered that. If it's not helpful, that's fine. I can jump right into the questions. It's up to the body to decide, I suppose.
Do you have additional materials for us?
I have no additional materials other than the presentation explaining the position of the applicant and some of the maybe logic behind the submittal of the application. As you know, the status of these units currently is it's 12 low-income rental units in Pasadera. The applicant submitted the application in an effort to address a number of practical considerations stemming from these low-income units. The issues which I think you may have been presented with in our letter from September number public transportation, access to public transportation, distance and access to jobs, to work areas, distance to services, and distance to schools. So, for example, this is in the Salinas high school district. It's in the Washington Union Elementary School District. Elementary schools are 4 miles away. Salinas High is, I think, 9.2 miles away or something like that. In terms of services, 7-Eleven is the nearest market, if you want to call it that, for your essentials, for your daily goods, but that's 4 miles away. The nearest grocery store or supermarket is Safeway in Delray Oaks, which is about 7 miles away. And for anyone who has to do that 68 commute at either earlier in the day or later in the day, knows that commute can take anywhere from 15 minutes, whether you're going to Monterey, maybe that's 15 minutes, it could be 25. If you're going to Salinas, say you had to go to school, you're a high school kid, or you're trying to get to work on time, that commute could range from 20 minutes to 35 or more, depending on if there's any traffic. Public transportation is another important thing that I'm not sure was, it's a completely practical concern, but the layout of the property is such that the income units are up at the top of the hill towards the back of the property. So as you go in, you make either a left or a right off of Highway 68, and you take the road there, Pasadera, back to the back of the property, and it is uphill, and it's a mile from 68 to where the inclusionary units are located. If you had to use public transportation, which many low-income renters do, you'd have to walk from your unit to the bus stop a mile away and then back after work. There's no real alternative for driving whatever vehicle you have down there and parking for the day, because it's not like a park and ride, it's just a bus stop. Given the distance to town, either town, Monterey or Salinas, or Marina, or anywhere else, from a practical standpoint, having a car puts you in a much more advantageous position, which again, and the LUAC at their meeting on September 20th reflected this in their comments. Many low-income renters may not have access to a car or 2 cars, depending on the size of the family. Regarding the availability of units currently. It's my understanding, I've been informed by the client, that 11 of the 12 are filled. I know there was some discussion about the 12th unit at the September meeting, and that 12th unit still remains vacant. Apparently, I'm informed that the client has shown the property on a number of occasions, and the two reasons for the unit not being filled was either they saw it and then began the income verification process and determined that they had made too much, or that they just did not think that it was close enough to their job or, again, their schools or where they felt it was too remote. I don't have any a declaration to that effect. I'm informed by the client that he and his manager have encountered that issue. Let's see. I think just to summarize, we came in, we applied for Workforce 2 conversion, to convert this to Workforce 2 housing with option to eventually sell each of these units. The hack back in September then were presented with the recommendation from staff that they be changed to moderate for sale units, and which we were comfortable with. And in the time since that meeting in September, the applicant and members from our firm have met with representatives from CHISPA who have indicated, and it would have, I don't know, maybe we could get Alfred to, at some point, maybe chime in, but in any event, CHISPA had indicated as well that this was not an ideal location for low income, but that CHISPA would be able to support moderate rental units, which again, we are open to. So even though the application you're looking at says Workforce 2 for sale units, we are comfortable with alternatives to and including moderate rental units, which is, not nearly the drastic leap as the application may reflect. And just to reiterate, this went to the LUAC in September, I believe it was September 20th. A lot of the concerns that I just raised were also raised by the LUAC in walking the property and really driving the property. And yes, ma'am.
Can you say what the acronym means?
I'm sorry,
please?
yes. The Land Use Advisory Committee for the Greater Monterey Peninsula. They went out there in September, and these issues were relayed to them, I believe, actually. We had met them out there, members from my firm had met them out there. So I think that's all that I had on that aspect. To get more to the point on the questions that you had raised regarding marketing strategy, the documentation of the low-income issues, and whether or not, I think ultimately what you're getting at is this just anecdotal? And I think that that's a fair question to ask.
Right, that's why it was a concern to the committee, and not that it may be valid,
Yes.
but we have, we'd like to see that.
Yeah.
We'd like to understand so we can also learn and help and advise other people in this situation.
My response is essentially that this is not entirely anecdotal evidence. If we pull up the Google Maps or we look at GPS images, this is a very real issue of distance. The access from simply accessing a public transportation kiosk, if you will, where you pick up the bus. Walking a mile there, walking a mile back, it is literally uphill as you're going back home.
That makes an assumption. Are you still doing your presentation, or are we asking
No,
questions now?
I'm
That
happy to
makes-
respond to questions.
That's all based on the assumption that people making this income are walking and using public transportation. I have made under this amount my entire life, and I'm 54 years old. And I have owned a car ever since I was age 15. And I've driven from Salinas to Monterey to work for years, sometimes through Marina, sometimes 68. So, and I don't have any children. And I've always lived in a household with no children. So proximity to school has never been a concern to my grandmother, my mom, my brother, my aunt, all of us who lived together, over the years. And our combined incomes would have, would fit these. And we've always had 1 or 2 cars. So I understand that that's a basis here, but that's why additional information is necessary, because for me, there's something wrong if people are not renting these units or not wanting to occupy these units, or, so that's why. What's going on? How are they being advertised? I mean, you say 2 people? You only had 2 people live at the place? Did I hear you?
No, I'm informed that there have been multiple,
Oh, okay.
yeah. They have shown it a number of times, was the representation to me, since October.
Right. So just again, this is what we're asking for, and I would hope that we would get this in an earnest attempt to help us, settle this. Because we want to, of course we want to.
Mhm.
No, I agree. I mean, Tony spoke to me about this in September.
Mhm.
I think it was the night before the meeting or the night of the meeting, one of the two. And I explained to him what my reservations were at that time, and quite frankly, they haven't changed. And you've pointed out a lot of things, and I grew up in Castro. I went to Salinas High School. Yeah, I had a car. So I have a lot of the background you're talking about, kind of like she does. At some point you figure it out. I've talked to some people that I know that work for the Pebble Beach Company that tell me that this is their income level. And they'd love to be able to know about a unit like this unit at that rental rate, because they believe they could qualify. And so my question is, okay, how did the information get out so that these kind of people could put in an application? One of the questions I asked was, quite simply, have you put the notice at Pebble Beach Company, or Pasadera, or any of those other places there, so that their workers could find out about it? My employer rents hundreds of units in Castro to these kinds of people. The granted, Castro, you'll say, well, yeah, but you've got the amenities there. Yeah, they also have a waiting list of like 2 years. So I know the need is there, and I'm just concerned that the information is not getting out in a fashion that the people that meet the criteria can respond to. And that's why we ask for the information.
Mhm.
And I think, we're building units in East Garrison with some of the very same characteristics as far as distance from high schools, distance from a number of places. And the demand's there, and when they build them, they rent them. The question is, what's the difference in that process that we went through and versus the process that Pasadera is using? But I must say, I am encouraged that what I heard you say was that if the evidence would show that it's not feasible, at least now you're entertaining not going to the fullest end of workforce to housing sale, to renting something that would be moderate. That's a big step. And I think that's a much more desirable, not a solution, but a potential solution, rather than just giving up rental property, because we want to keep
Steph
as
kind of
much.
got beat up about that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I think the extreme.
I watched the video. But I appreciate the comments, and certainly we are hoping to be responsive to the concerns of this committee and staff.
Yeah, I don't believe we're saying there's no way. We're saying we're from Missouri. Show us. Show us what we've asked for, And, you know, when we have some documentation, because you have to understand, we let you do this, or your client do this, 500 other people can come in here and they're gonna want to do the same thing. And, well, they didn't show, you know, these guys didn't show you anything, so why do we have to show you stuff now? You know, it's like, when you're an attorney, you build a case, right, based on evidence. We're trying to build a case on evidence too, to back us up.
And there could be, I'm sorry, yes, of course, you go ahead.
Just briefly, I'm not an attorney, but I have worked very closely with attorneys in nonprofit organizations, and we've dealt with very difficult employee relations situations. And one of the things that I was always told by my colleague who was a trained attorney, if it's not documented, it's not done. And you were asked very specific questions to bring to the table of documentation of marketing strategies, flyers, sign-in sheets, etc. You know, this is, everything you're telling us is hearsay. I want to see copies of flyers. I want to see minutes. I want to see notes, because everything that is stated here is absolutely correct. If we let your client go through with this, it will cascade and waterfall. And it's because we didn't do our due diligence and ask for documentation. And I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, well, I think that, I mean, if I can just then try to address some of these questions then from my communication with the client is, I guess, starting with the marketing strategy. I don't believe there is a formal marketing strategy because they are 12 units. I mean, it's not, we're not talking about a, you know,
Okay,
But
a
again,
flyer on a
okay,
bulletin
you've got
board.
some units, you've rented them out before, they must have developed a flyer that, hey, when a new unit comes, well, okay, we got that flyer, well, how do we need to update it a little bit, we update it, and then boom, here it is.
I mean, it doesn't
Or
have to be
the
big one.
requirements for the person living in this unit, they have to meet certain income levels. I would presume that that would be written down somewhere so that maybe that's part of the flyer that shows what it's gonna take to qualify for this unit. So when the person goes, hey, I'm gonna apply for that unit, they already know what these requirements are. As opposed to, oh, well, there's a unit in Pasadera and the rent's cheap, so I'm gonna go for it. And when you get there, you find out there's no way in heck I was ever gonna qualify for it.
Right. If it's an ad in, you know, the Carmel Pinecone or the San Francisco Chronicle, you know, that's different than an ad in the Weekly, flyer at laundromats, and I mean, so marketing strategy does not have to be a big fancy thing. It would be appropriate to the number of units. And really, this is not to be just recalcitrant here. I mean, we want to fix this. And that's the fourth bullet point addresses the system, you know, do we have something in the system here? How is your client, you know, about selecting and pre-qualifying and then sending it over for income certification? You know, I mean, we want to learn if there's something wrong with that process, you know, but we need the information to do that. We can't just, and there's been plenty of time. So I'm unclear why, I guess it doesn't matter why we don't have it, but that's what we need.
Another example is, do you advertise in Spanish and English? Are you coordinating with the Public Housing Authority and other institutions that deal a lot with that target population? How many units do you have rented right now?
11,
So there's only one vacancy?
yes.
So-
Since October, and I guess before that there had been another long-term vacancy, but yeah, 11.
So there's definitely a demand for these units then?
No, what he's saying is the long-term vacancy is supporting that there isn't.
The what?
It depends on
Yeah.
whether
One out of
that's what we've
12.
been trying
But,
to
so
run them or not.
if I may, so a couple things. One, the LUAC did say that this is the wrong place for this type of product. That's out there. If we were to go in with a tax credit application to build similar units in a similar location, we'd be laughed out of Sacramento because it is so far from amenities. So maybe it's not the perfect location for the product. We have product there. The question now is, how are we gonna get it filled? And at what levels? Somebody had mentioned the public housing authorities. They may not be the best, but somebody like Chispa, who has a waiting list and actually has had to close their waiting lists because they're so long, may be able to give you a decent number of referrals tomorrow.
At the low level,
Yeah,
Section 8, I know it's not called Section 8.
housing choice vouchers.
at the low level.
Those people.
Really
they
reluctant
probably
to
have a
move
list.
it. We have
Yeah.
so few, I'm really reluctant, unless almost every channel has been exhausted, to change the classification. Really, because we can't, once they're gone, they're gone. And we're not building more.
It's so hard to find a place that a low-income family can rent. Just to change it, from low to moderate is impactful.
So redacted information, if you're worried about, privacy or anything, literally, like we had this many people apply. Here's what their income level ended up being. Here's what the requirement was. Here was the problem. Here was the problem. Here was the problem. We just put this in on this date. By the time, it took too long. It took 3 months, and the applicant already had secured other accommodations, or left the area, or left for seasonal work. I mean, this is what we want to see. This is what we want to see. And these things don't apply to all poor folks, schools, services.
Enough?
Yeah. I
We're
mean,
glad you came.
You're welcome.
I'm happy to be here. No, I mean, like I said, and I meant it, it's important to get this feedback. I think from the client's perspective, we're at a point where we do want to move forward, I don't know if staff had prepared a recommendation or if the thought was,
So, would it be worth, I'm kind of jumping in here as this has been going on already, but would it be worth kind of postponing this and seeing if the client is willing to present the stuff that's being requested, or should we just move forward with making our decision?
Well, I think that's kind of up to the client here, because what the recommendation I see written in front of me right now is to deny the request. And I can't speak for everybody else, but I know that's what I would be supporting at this point if I'm forced to make a decision right now.
That was supposed to be changed. Right now, we're not making a recommendation either way, I'm sorry, that's.
Because there's a new group.
Yeah, so what we're looking for at this point is for direction from the HAC on, do you want to go forward with a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to deny the request, or do you want to ask the client to go back, provide the applicant to go back, provide the information, and come back and make the case, or is there some third alternative that you want explored?
Well,
I'd continue.
I just asked my question again, I think.
Please continue, yeah.
Is the applicant willing to, is it worth our energy, the applicant and ours, to extend this to the next meeting and see if they're willing to present the stuff that's being requested?
And if I may, something else, this is a very hard conversation to have because Cody and I and Tony have all had conversations with Alfred, never at the same time. And Alfred's not here to represent himself. And say what Chispa's, what their waiting list might be, where they may have demand. He's told us that at some of their projects that are in Carmel Valley, they have waiting lists. And it's not that dissimilar to Pasadera in its proximity to public transit. But he's not here to say that, so, it's hearsay on my part.
So all the more reason, if we have this data, it sounds like solutions that we come up with here at HAC are transferable to other agencies in the community that are facing these same problems, that are problems that we're gonna have. So it's batter up, and this is good for us. It's wise and needed, and if we vote on it today, and I can't say it, but say, if it's approved, great. If it was thumbs down, we're kicking the can down the road because it's just gonna go to the next layer up. And we will lose the benefit of coming up with solutions at our level. And why do we exist? We exist so we can be the experts on this aspect of it and make informed recommendations to the next level up. So I think we should take advantage of this process. And for whatever reason, I'm sure the client did not provide you with these. They had their reasons, I don't know, but it's needed.
Darby, recently written county housing element, does it give us some guidance there on the need or demand for number of low-income rentals versus the need for moderate income for sale units? I mean, I know it does, I just don't have
The
it.
challenge is, yes, the document in global does, but what the applicant is saying is not at this location. So, yes, in the county, and we can then make the argument that, well, in the county, yes, there is a demand for this type of unit in Salinas, but not on 68. That's where the housing element breaks down, is the housing element describes the need in the county in general, without saying, oh, there's, pockets of need here, or this is an inappropriate place. What I would defer to is the state tax credit allocation committee, looks at projects from around the state when they're trying to allocate the very scarce resources of money. And they would look at this project and say, it doesn't make sense, okay? That's just the way the state checklist would work out, because it's all based on how far is it from a pharmacy, from a grocery store, from a school, from public parks, stuff, assets like that.
Well,
Which is,
but I mean, it doesn't make sense for the state to loan money at this time for
Right.
something like that.
right, so
It's a different animal.
it's, in this case, the project wouldn't qualify. Okay? That's not to say that there's not the demand for the project.
Right.
It's that by the objective criteria, the project would not be competitive for public finance.
Right, they're saying that they could get more bang for their buck somewhere else.
Yeah, potentially, yes. True. Well, not only that, but better serve the residents somewhere else. But no, the housing element unfortunately does not address, at a sub-county level demand.
Right, but it does
Oh,
give you
yeah,
a number for demand generally in the county.
Oh, yeah, there is 0.3 income restricted units for every very low income household. Karen, if you want, email me tomorrow and I will get you those, because I have them.
Okay.
And I believe it's 0.5 units for every low income household that's looking for it. And that's out of our consolidated plan for the Community Development Block Grant Program. It's all HUD generated data.
So there's a huge demand.
There's a huge pent-up demand. What I can't say is, if I build something on right out here, is this the right location? That's a business proposition that I don't get involved in.
It wouldn't qualify for tax credits now, but it was a done deal over 10 years ago.
Yeah,
We have
so-
12 units in our low-income housing stock. which
Yeah.
is-
So I think that what the client has said, or what Cody has said, is they're willing to try to explore and find something that works for everybody. I don't know, the next meeting's not till May, so that's a decision that you would have to consider with your client, as to whether you want to force the planning commission, or if you want to defer and let the hack continue, try to come back with something at May. And maybe between now and May, not just trying to put together the documents the hack has requested, but the three of us get together with Tony, or with Alfred, and see what makes sense.
Yeah, I think having Chispa's input here would have been very useful, certainly, especially regarding our conversations with him where or Chispa in general, where they represented that moderate rental was certainly an acceptable alternative. So, I'm reluctant to kick it down the road, only because it's been, some time. But I imagine if we voted today.
Yeah. So the option is basically yours. You want to walk out of here, I think there's enough interest in HAC that we will allow you to come back with additional information if you'd like to. However, if you want to walk out of here with a decision, then I'd be happy to ask for a motion from the members here, and we'll vote on it, and we'll get you a decision. Take your pick.
Just a comment on that, I think the decision, from what I've heard from the members in conversation, would probably be no as you're requested. And the recommendation would be that we do everything we can to retain rental in low or moderate income level, that we don't look at the workforce, monitor workforce too. Some language like that, I think we can come up with, but clearly what you asked for would be, because you haven't changed anything in terms of what you asked for.
Sure, yeah, and we I don't think at this point really would expect that anyone would be receptive to that. Yeah, I mean, if a determination could be made to that effect, which, essentially recommends retaining rental in some capacity, I think we would be comfortable with that. And then present it to, I suppose, the planning commission.
Yeah, that's the next step, yeah.
You have to go there, right? Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I think it ends up Board of Supervisors, but procedurally, I think it
Well,
goes to the
from the
planning
complexity of
commission.
what you're asking for, you're going to have to go above this committee. I mean, it's not going to be done here.
Is that feasible from a procedural standpoint? From,
Well, we can
Point of
certainly,
order.
I can certainly request a,
Special meeting I'm hearing over here. A lot of
I think
ideas.
the idea is,
Quicker than the next, yeah, it's much quicker. Special meeting?
what's that?
If we did a special meeting before May, and if we received the data, because I make decisions based on data-driven decisions. If I don't have the data, I can't make a sound decision. And I think that's what Karen was saying, informed, we want to be informed, and we don't have the information. So I would be willing to do a special meeting in between now and May, one in which maybe Alfred were present, or the three of you had already met, and we'd have responses, and maybe even additional information, because this is all investigation. We were asking investigative questions, and I don't feel that they were answered.
And there were questions that Jackie Anciano also raised from planning.
Mm-hmm.
So even whatever comes out of this, she's gonna ask the same questions down the road.
Yeah, understood.
So,
Yeah, I mean, again, keeping in mind that, workforce 2 is, we understand the difficulties with that, and that it's not necessarily certainly the preference of this body. Could the decision today be to deny the application as proposed and recommend that all efforts to retain rental units on site are made by, I suppose, staff and the applicant?
Well, that's only part of it, then we still have to come up with at what level. And again, I think we're gonna be hard pressed to change what you have without documentation to allow us to make an informed decision to change it.
Would having Chispa's input have any impact at all on the body?
It's hard to say without knowing exactly what the guy was
what
gonna
it
say.
was. But this is what we want, it's really clear. So I actually have a question, I wish we had a parliamentarian here, because I would actually explicitly like to recommend or make a motion that we agree to move this to our next meeting. Now, whether that's a special meeting or May, that's what I would like to do. I don't want to vote this down today. I want this to be figured out at this level.
I second that. Is that an actual motion?
Well, I don't know that we can do that.
Move to table to the next meeting, is that a proper motion?
You could table this till the next meeting. You know, at that point, it would be up to Cody to go back and talk to his client and decide whether or not they're going to come back or just go to the planning commission.
So,
That is their option.
right, so I would like to move that we table this to our next meeting and leave out there whether that meeting is a special meeting or in May. But I would like to make that motion, and I think you're a second.
If they're gonna skip over us and go to the planning commission, I think it would behoove us to take a vote, just so the planning commission has a feel for our feelings about this.
I'd be willing to go to the
Yeah.
planning commission and express and represent us.
Yeah, but it's not the same.
Our
Yeah.
thoughts. Well, we don't know that they're going to go there. They wouldn't do that. Like refusing to provide the information required at the lower body and going up. They're not gonna do that.
Well, I guess I hear the point, because I
That
don't
would look
hear
bad.
a response from the applicant at all indicating any interest in providing the information.
You have something you want to say?
I just have to say that if I had to vote, I couldn't vote because you are not providing the information you were requesting. And it's really hard to make a decision like they are been saying over and over without the documentation, the statistics, the paperwork. How can you make a decision? It's just words, nothing else.
Okay, so, we have a motion, so let's vote on that motion.
Well, Wayne had something to say about it, right? Can you say more about what you were thinking about voting on it now?
No,
Or was that?
with your motion, I'll take a vote on that.
We're voting
I
on the
think
motion.
the other part that I think they're missing, though, in the discussion, is that any changes that are proposed here are going to be very complex, and I think, Darby, you can explain a little bit of that. I mean, it's not something that, if we made a decision today to say, okay, whatever we decided, it's not that simple. We don't have that
So-
authority.
Yeah, so this is a decision that is wrapped up in an environmental impact report that was done to certify the Pasadera project. Planning has not yet wrapped its head around how any changes might affect that part of the approval process for the project. So everything has to go back to the board. We were, as staff, directed by the planning director to go back and try to identify where these 12 units came from, so we could try and explain to somebody, the board, and the hack, why the low-income units were there. Unfortunately, the clerk to the board doesn't have 25-year-old audio tapes of that meeting, and they were doing action units at the time, so it's like, we adopted the resolution. I don't have any of the background. I can't tell you how we got to this point. All I can tell you is this is where we are, and it potentially opens up a lot more as we go in and try to make changes to the condition of approval. Because this is a part of the conditions of approval for the Pasadera project. County Council's not here to tell you what's involved. I've never had to do it, so I can't give you any first-hand experience as to what to expect or what the steps might be. only that it is potentially very complex. And as I stated earlier, your question's asking for evidence of, that there is no demand for low-income units is something that the planning department staff has posed and has indicated that they need before they can go to the planning commission. So even if the client chooses not to wait for the hack, they're going to get that request again.
And we could have all brains, all wisdom on deck. I mean, if county council, if we need county council here for this, let's make sure county council is at the meeting. If you need Alfred, let's make sure it works, let's draw forth all the wisdom here and hammer this out.
I think, if we believe by changing a process that we can be successful, you have to have the applicant want that process changed and have the will to do it. If you want, if the applicant's not happy with that, they're going to move it on anyway, because it will not be solved in this forum. What could happen in this forum is to make recommendations as to where we believe we stand in terms of what we think should happen. In other words, as written, no, we don't approve as written. If the applicant doesn't have the appetite to come back and think that it can be solved by process, then I think there's only thing where it's going to end up is going to end up ultimately in the Board of Supervisors. Because we don't have the authority to make those changes.
Let me reiterate, let me make sure I understood. 11 of the 12 are occupied.
Yes.
Okay, so another assumption that's being made that maybe we could be helpful with is that there's a problem because of one unit not being occupied. That doesn't seem like an unsurmountable problem. It doesn't, and I'm curious, I mean, in some way it's unsurmountable to your client, but it's not understandable why that's such a problem. If it is, they simply don't want these, they want to get out from under this because they believe it's an unfair, unjust, and unattainable situation, that's different than what's being given to us.
Okay, so right now, we're not being given any information
Yeah.
to prove that, so we can only make our own assumptions.
I would, the motion is there to vote on it at the next
Yes.
meeting.
Okay.
I hear what Wayne's saying, and I feel a little bit stuck, right? Because I feel like by us moving forward with maybe having a special meeting, we're doing our due diligence and really trying to make sure that we're satisfying what our expectations are on this committee. But at the same time, I also agree that, if we come to a vote and express our feelings on it, I mean, now again, we could maybe take a straw poll and indicate that in the minutes perhaps, and that way, if we wanted to, we can go to the planning commission and speak on that with evidence from the approved minutes. So, I mean, there's different ways that we can approach it. This is a tough one.
And I'm open for, I'm one who has the time available. I have no problem coming back to a special meeting.
Yeah.
If we think it's a process issue. I think it's more than a process
So, it
issue. I
just
don't
says the
think
next
there's
meeting.
a solution to that myself, but
Next.
I'm open to come back and give it a try if that's what you guys want to do. It's up to you. You're the applicant.
And I think what Darby was stating was, with the other groups and organizations, they are going to petition you for information and data, and you will, either in our group or with other
Exactly.
groups, you will come against the same stumbling blocks because they need it for their data-driven decisions.
Exactly.
We'll be a canary
Okay.
for you to be prepared for the next level.
Or they just say, the heck with you guys, we're gonna go to the next level and we'll deal with them. The one less
nicer.
hurdle we have to jump.
Let's just get to the supervisors quick.
This
so
is
we can-
nicer.
So, yeah, I mean, it's,
I have a procedural question.
Yeah.
So if we decide not to move forward with the decision that we're deciding on now, can somebody else make a,
well, you may make different motions. So if right now, we have a motion and a second. For example, if you were to withdraw your second, then nobody else would make the second for this, then I would move on and ask for any other motions that people would like to put forward.
I didn't really can withdraw a second, but I guess I would do that.
I second.
She
You're
seconds him.
seconding her or you're seconding him? Okay, so you want to move forward with extending it to the next meeting.
And hopefully by that time we have the right information in front of us.
Presuming they're willing to supply.
Then we'll-
Exactly.
Can I also ask a procedural question?
Yes.
So I don't have the agenda before me, I'm not sure that I was sent one, but thank you. So the vote would be to, so Darby, what's staff's recommendation?
Right now, staff's recommendation is that we're just looking for guidance on how the HAC wants us to proceed. You know, do they want us to continue this so we can give you another opportunity to gather the information? Or do they want to just say, you know, you had your chance, you didn't give it to us, and we're not going.
We still don't have enough information to.
And based on the lack of information, we're going to, you know, recommend that it remain, the condition of approval be unchanged.
So in other words, the discussion that was had or not had in September about the moderate ownership option, that is no longer, that is been removed from.
Well, I think the issue for the HAC's perspective is the evidence wasn't, that they requested after the September meeting hasn't been provided for them to make an informed decision.
Right.
And without that information, they are, it sounds like, unwilling to make any motion that would be in the affirmative for converting them to moderate or workforce or anything other than, you know, maybe very low income. If for some reason your client was willing to step back and give us a deeper level of affordability. But that's what it sounds like to me is right now there's no appetite from the body to consider anything other than low income.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if the body could be swayed by, you know, providing this evidence and having CHISPA's input, you know, that would be useful, obviously.
Wonderful.
But-
That sounds great.
But if it can't be, then we have
If
spent
you-
2
That sounds
months.
wonderful.
If you were to bring in evidence that proves your points, proves what you're saying is as you are stating it, I'm sure we would all listen to it and we would be more than happy to make a new decision. But without anything, the knowledge that I have points that the information that I'm given here is incorrect. And I need it to be proved to me that what you're saying is so.
For example, you
Yeah.
talked about the hardship of the people walking the mile down the hill to get to the bus stop. You could say, well, that's, you know, evidence of this is 90% of our current low-income tenants don't have cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or maybe the opposite.
In terms of marketing, flyers were placed here, or we sent emails to Rabbit Farms, we sent emails to whatever, so, you know,
We posted on
we
Craigslist.
posted on, yeah.
With documentation.
I live in Soledad, and in that city, to get to a bus stop, you walk more than a mile, and most of them are uphill. Yeah, I mean, that's not that much of a hardship for people that I have knowledge of anyway.
And why are we saying this? Not because necessarily we're hardcore, we're doing it because we're accountable. We've been given these positions, we're supposed to, if we have to have really good reasons for not carrying out these agreements we have made, right? And we need to be able to justify it to the public, to the people we represent. So we can do it, but this is gonna be we gotta be able to justify why we're doing it.
So, yeah.
Okay, so-
Just to recap the question.
On behalf of the client, is there any interest in coming back if we extend this?
I think we want a determination so that we can move forward.
Like no to me. Okay, so we have a motion, we still have a second.
Yes.
To extend this meeting, or extend this agenda item to another meeting.
I will, if,
We're done.
I'm gonna vote in favor of it so that it's
All
clear
in
that the
favor?
client turned us down.
One aye. Does
Oh,
anybody
no.
else vote aye?
Yes.
2, 3.
No, paper.
Three, discussion?
Motion to
Yes.
continue it.
To
Okay,
continue.
there's 4. So we have 4,
I'll say aye.
5,
Six.
6.
I could go for it, but it didn't sound specific enough. Cheese was not in there, the client comes back, I don't, you know, I'm a little bit
No,
lost
you
there.
you were just told the client's probably not interested in coming back.
Okay, then
So what, so
We offered.
yes or no? What's your vote? To extend it or not to extend it?
I would vote to extend it, but I prefer that we would make a statement to him. But I would probably vote no, yes, no. I would vote no if asked to vote on that.
We're voting right now
Okay.
on extending this.
I would vote no.
No. So I've got 1 no. Do I have, are there any other no's? Okay, I'd vote no also.
2 noes.
3 no. Okay, so the motion was approved to allow this agenda item to roll over to the next meeting. 6 to 3.
Okay.
If you don't show up, we'll just check where you're at.
And we're willing, and now, some people said they're willing to have a special meeting, so that the client, I mean, if that would make a difference if you're willing.
yes, what would the timing on something like that be?
Part of that would be, driven by how fast, your client, the county, and, Chiefs can get together.
Okay,
And provide the information.
sure.
And
Okay.
once the information is provided, they'll contact us and let us know. you know,
Then, and then it's
we'll
trying to
propose
coordinate
some
9
meeting.
calendars.
Timing, yeah, I
Right.
understand.
And
Okay.
hopefully that'll meet your goal of wanting to move forward.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
voting it down is one way to move forward, but you're gonna have to come up with this stuff anyway, so we can,
Okay.
we're giving as well.
Moving
Move
on,
forward.
moving on. Okay, we're done with the old business, we're done with new business. Do we have
Yeah.
anything besides scheduling the next
Can
meetings?
we go back and formally introduce?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Virginia, welcome. Please give us a little bio on yourself.
I've been living in Salinas for the last 35 years of my life. I was a baby. And I've been a community volunteer since that time. Since the first year I got here, working with the school, churches, nonprofit organizations, and be part of forming 4 nonprofit organizations in the county, working from housing issues to health issues to domestic violence, crime on the street, police department, sheriff department. So I'm being involved in a little bit in a lot of different things in the community. I'm myself married with 2 children and trying to keep going with the family as the kids grow and move out of the house. But my life is being devoted to help the community any way that I can. And so when I got a phone call from the housing committee, I thought it was very interesting, but something happened in the family that held me back for almost a year. So, but I'm back on the field. So thank you so much.
Right.
Thank you.
So I got,
I have one question too.
okay,
If the applicant doesn't come back, will this committee have an opportunity to still extend their opinion to the
Yes,
planning commission?
yeah, it
Okay.
will be wrapped into the plan.
Make sure that we can do that.
Good question.
Wayne's got it.
We will cover the, it came here, the committee had the questions, the client didn't provide the information and went to the
And
client.
these are areas of concern, something
Yeah.
like that. Okay, I'm okay with that.
so I'm just thinking, maybe just me, but since we have so many new members, which I love seeing, Is there interest for you guys to learn about us that have been here for a while?
I would like to know if it's the first name.
I know, we've been around forever, we know each other, but you guys probably don't know much about us, and since you're sharing who you are, I thought maybe it'd be nice to share who we are.
Sure, that
Wayne.
would be cool.
Oh, okay. I'm Wayne Ross. I live in Monterey, and I think I've been a member of this committee since the time it was out where the county was out on Natividad or something. I think that's where the first meeting was, out by the hospital. Anyway, it's been quite a while. It's been about 14 years or 12 years anyway. It's been a very exciting time and an evolution of change. I've enjoyed it. We used to meet once a month, and we used to have a lot of work that we would do. That's changed a bit, and I think for the better, actually. But I've enjoyed it, and I think you will as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark. I'm in Royal Oaks, and I've been on the committee for a couple of years. My background is working for cities and the State Department of Housing, so public sector developer and housing and development manager for cities for a number of years, decades.
I just showed up. Well, I guess I'm from Salinas. My name is Wes White. Community enthusiast, I guess. The housing advisory committee ended up being a little bit different than what I expected, but I'm still curious and learning and what's going on. It's important.
So I'm Mo Cabato, born and raised in the area, in Castro actually. Still live in Oak Hills. Work for a general contractor, a Sony Incorporated. I'm a project manager. So used to do a lot of residential, now I do mainly commercial work. But I get a lot into the cost. And I also do a lot of development work, so kind of familiar with some of the process from the private side as opposed to the public side. Been in the hack for, I think it's about 11 years now. And, enjoy what we do.
My name's Karen Araujo, and I am appointed by District 4 Board of Supervisor member Jane Parker. I have a room in someone's home in South Salinas. I was a homeowner for 30 years in South Salinas, and the first 20 years of my life I grew up on Roosevelt Street, and my grandparents landed there like the grapes of wrath, as they say, years ago. And Chispa actually had its first, they bought my family's property to put the Roosevelt townhomes. So I have a special place in my heart for Chispa and the good work they do. I still have the same telephone number that my grandparents have had since the late 1939, 1940. It was Harrison 2, now it's 422. So I've kept that phone number with me. But anyway, my interest in this is I just have a part-time job. I don't have kids, I don't have elders. I have a part-time job at a local nonprofit, and my interest is doing work in the community to prove that we can have integrity to our highest ideals, and to wrestle with the tough questions. We ask people to, if I'm going to ask people to be held accountable to high standards we set as a community, I'm willing to get down there in the dirt and do the work to help those solutions happen. It's not easy. I learn a lot. I don't know a lot specifically about housing. I did before I came here. I'm learning a lot. But transparency, integrity, consistency, reliability, and coming up with community solutions so we can be the kind of community we want to be. That's why I'm here.
Hello, my name is Rosa Gonzalez. I, as you heard, am from South County. Not born there, but been there since I was 2. Went away for 15 years, lived in Mexico, and came back. I am retired from the school district, and I couldn't take retirement, so I went back to work for a nonprofit here locally. I have been involved in Soledad Local Development Corporation, which is no more. Basically, we still have coffee once in a while. Housing Authority, when it had a Soledad office, I was on one of their boards for a little while. I've been here for about 4 months. Know absolutely nothing, but I am learning every time I come. These fine people are teaching me, And welcome aboard.
My name is Natalia Molina, and I am a 3-year transplant to the great state of California by way of Arizona and originally from Pennsylvania. I have a background in public health, and one of the main tenets of having a healthy community is that foundation of food, clothing, and shelter. I work for a nonprofit that serves seniors, and it doesn't matter whether you're talking to seniors, a new family, a single person, students, you know, housing is an issue that affects everyone. And like what Karen said, I really feel strongly about integrity, transparency, data in the decisions that we make. And I take what we do very seriously. Brand new, I too am also new. I think I'm only 4 or 5 months into this committee, learning so much very quickly. It's like a fire hose, actually, all the information. But I enjoy it. It keeps me off of the bar stools and off of the
Good, thank you.
I'm Tyler. I introduced myself before you got here. I'm new as well, so I'm sure we can jump on the side.
Right.
I don't want to make everybody go through that again, so we'll go out for coffee sometime.
Sure, thank you.
I'm Darby Marshall, I'm county staff.
Our staff.
I do mostly community development, dabble in the housing, more on the development review process and figuring out what the inclusionary standards for a subdivision will be. And I've been with the county 20 years. Basically in the same job, moved like 6 times and never changed jobs.
And I'm Rosa, and I've only been with the county for a little bit over a year, but I've been doing housing for over a decade now. And pretty much my position is implementation of the programs, administration of the units, day-to-day inquiries that come through the door. So I do a little bit of everything, reporting on our grants to the state, quarterly, annually, or whatever it requires. So that's pretty much some of those things I do. And I'll
I'm Ellen McKinney. I've only been with the department since January, so this is all new to me also. I've got 24 years with the county. I've been a member of the Monterey County Mental Health Commission for 16 years, chair and that past chair. Have a Veterans Collaborative that we started 10 years ago that we meet monthly, and it's a great networking group for everyone that's interested in housing and the homelessness and working with our veterans. So those are my passions.
Great.
Thank you. Okay, so upcoming meetings, we know May 9th's on the agenda unless we get something sooner. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Okay, I think everybody will be all in favor, right?
Aye, aye, aye.
Thank you all.
I just have a
I get that
request.
motion.